Fallout 76 just got another new update, and this is actually a pretty special one, as I would argue this is actually probably one of the biggest updates ever outside of the Wastelanders update, which will probably always be the biggest update ever, because what we got with this one was new story content, the finale of the Brotherhood of Steel questline, so now you could play it through as one cohesive story, but even further, a big overhaul to legendaries and how those work, as well as legendary crafting, legendary power armor, as well as this update is one of the most content-rich updates we've had in a long time and really builds off of some of the quality of life improvements brought by ones earlier this year. So in this video, whether you're an active and regular player, I'm going to break down what the update adds, my thoughts and opinions on it, because it's not all great and the update actually does have some problems, unfortunately. This is obviously a pretty long video, so there are some timestamps down below if you want to skip around to various sections, but with that said, let's first take a look at some of the new story content that has been added. So this is the finale to the Brotherhood of Steel questline that kicked off late last year with Steel Dawn and now is ending with Steel Rain. I'm not going to go to any spoilers, mostly in the background. What I'm going to be showing off is some of the earlier quests so I don't ruin too much about what the content actually is. And to be clear with this one, it is a direct continuation of the previous Steel Dawn questline, so if you didn't play that, you will have to play those quests first, and honestly, I think that's a good thing. As far as the totally new content, there's really only about 3 to 4 hours of new quests. Obviously, that's going to vary based on your level, if you're fast traveling around, easily killing the enemies, or struggling to kill the enemies. But if you're doing both Steel Dawn and Steel Rain in tandem, which I really think is the best way to play, you have a good 6 to 10 hours of content there. And these really feel like they are meant to be played back to back. Steel Rain picks up immediately after the conclusion of Steel Dawn, where you have this big choice and a big fight, and honestly is probably more enjoyable. Steel Dawn was very much so setting up the framework. There was kind of simpler quests, or quests that felt like they were less consequential, but when you jump into Steel Rain, things get a bit meatier. You're introduced into some new characters with a new type of super mutant, as well as these Hellcat Raider type enemies. And if you were somebody to play Steel Dawn, one of the really cool things about Steel Rain is there's a lot of callbacks, both to the characters and some of the events that happened in Steel Dawn. One of the most surprising things to me was how many characters from Steel Dawn actually come back and play either a minor or major role in this part 2. They did a really good job with the continuity here, despite there being a rather large 6-month plus break in between the two DLCs releasing. With that said, as far as the actual content itself goes, although I think the story felt a bit more substantial, so I enjoyed it more than Steel Dawn, it still kind of is that familiar or similar Fallout 76 quest loop. You're going to go to a place, have some dialogue, or read some terminal entries, get some background lore, fight off some enemies, then have some more dialogue, or go to a different place and talk to some more people. It kind of is following that same style and format that both Wastelanders and Steel Dawn followed, and that's not necessarily a problem, but this is definitely not a DLC that is innovating in any major way or really upping the stakes in one big way or another. The choices in Fallout 76 have always been pretty lacking due to it always being online, so they're a bit more restricted in what kind of consequences you can cause, and it definitely feels like one of the major flaws this time around also. You have almost the illusion of choice where you could make a decision one way or another, but it doesn't really impact things all that much. But also, at the same time, you are still playing more Fallout questing content, which I know a lot of us, including me, just really enjoy. And in that regard, Steel Rain is a ton of fun, and if you already have Fallout 76, this is totally free content to enjoy. And I would really classify Steel Rain overall as good enough. Was it a huge innovation? Did it blow me away? No. But was it fun, enjoyable Fallout content that is totally free? Yes. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer to play it if you already own Fallout 76, especially if you haven't played Steel Dawn. Again, playing this as one cohesive story is really enjoyable, a good 6 to 10 hours of new content. And if I was to rank the Fallout 76 story DLCs thus far, I would probably say that the Wastelanders Raider side is still my favorite. Steel Rain probably comes in at number 2, then the Wastelanders Settler side, and then Steel Dawn was probably my least favorite thus far. And from playing this, you actually get some pretty cool rewards. You'll get this unique weapon after completing the first quest in the series, known as the Facebreaker. This being a unique power fist, it does have a unique paint job and specific set of legendary effects. You could actually unlock the plan, so you could have this paint job but different legendary effects by playing daily ops, but if you just want this static one, you do get it from the first quest, which is pretty cool. There's a few other miscellaneous things you get just by progressing things. The Merc outfit from the Fallout 4 Creation Club, although it does have some updates for Fallout 76, the Brotherhood of Steel civvies, the bungalow as a camp object, but the biggest unlock you will get overall is definitely the incredibly powerful Hellcat power armor. You're going to fight Hellcats all throughout the DLC, but the Hellcat power armor is probably the best power armor in the the game, or at least arguably the best power armor in the game. This you will get just by completing the quest line overall. It just is kind of given to you at the end randomly. It doesn't actually make a ton of sense from a lore perspective, but that's besides the point. It has a totally custom and unique design, but it also has a very powerful passive effect of 2% ballistic damage reduction per piece for up to 12% ballistic damage reduction if you have a whole set. So if an enemy shoots you with a ballistic weapon, like a shotgun, a rifle, an assault rifle, if you're wearing a full set of this, it'll deal 12% less damage overall. It's just a flat 12% damage reduction, which when coupled with the 42% damage reduction that is by default in power armor, makes this particularly powerful. So overall, Steel Rain's one of those things where, is it my favorite piece of Fallout content? No, but that's not to say it's bad either. It's more free Fallout 76 story content that gives you free and cool new rewards. It does take you on a genuinely interesting adventure. It's definitely, at least for me, one of the better of the Fallout 76 story DLCs we've gotten thus far. But I think one of the really cool parts about the new story content is there's a lot of other subsystems added to the game, even with this update, that will also occupy your time. So I think a great loop is to do some of the story content, then take a break after you complete a quest and mess around with some of the other new features, like the major one with legendary crafting. So now with this update, you can, for a cost, craft legendary armor, weapons, and legendary power armor. Legendary power armor in particular being a new and distinctive addition for Fallout 76, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So at its core, it's actually a relatively simple system. To craft a legendary item, you'll need the actual item, so a weapon, a piece of armor, or a piece of power armor. This can be a legendary item already, and you could re-roll the effects, or it can be non-legendary, and you could craft it into a new legendary. You'll need some legendary modules. This is something added with the Wastelanders update. You buy them for the purveyor at the cost of 50 script each. There's 10 available per day to purchase. And then lastly, you need a totally new item with legendary cores, which you can get from completing daily ops, public events, and even some of those boss fights. So basically, you go to a crafting bench, you have all of these items, and you can create a 1-star, a 2-star, or a 3-star legendary. And when you create this, the 3 legendary effects you get will be completely random, just chosen from the pool of legendary effects. And really, that's the entire system. And it's pretty handy if you want one specific item as a legendary. Like, let's say you love your Exo 1 power armor and you specifically want Exo 1 power armor legendary. Using this, you can choose your Exo 1 power armor and specifically craft it into a legendary variant of itself. Otherwise, you'd kind of just be relying on RNG, crossing your fingers you not only get a piece of legendary power armor to drop, but also that it actually is the right type of power armor. Legendary crafting allows you to narrow that down, at least somewhat. There's a big asterisk there though, because when you actually get into the costs of these, it does get pretty expensive. So the way to get legendary cores is honestly not a huge problem, and you'll probably end up having a ton of legendary cores if you regularly play. You get a guaranteed 8 cores if you do things like Encrypted, if you fight the Wendigo Colossus, and if you have 3 creatures living during Project Paradise, or Free Range. Free Range in particular seems like a great one that a lot of people will farm. You get 5 from the Scorched Beast Queen, and then if you're doing a regular public event, or if you get Elder on daily ops, you just have a chance at getting between 1 and 3 cores. But cores aren't the real bottleneck, because if you play enough, you'll just get an endless amount of cores. The real bottleneck is going to actually be legendary modules. So with this update, the currency system in Fallout 76 was changed. The daily script limit was up to now 300 script per day. So as you delete weapons in the vending machine, you could earn up to 300 script per day compared to the previous 150. You could also hold up to 10,000 on your character, and some other things were changed. You can now have up to 10,000 caps. You can get up to 400 gold bullion today and hold 10,000 gold bullion on your character. But with this system, the cost of crafting a legendary item will be, for a weapon, a 1-star will be 1 core and 2 modules, a 2-star will be 3 cores and 3 modules, and a 3-star will be 5 cores and 4 modules. For legendary power armor, the costs are exactly the same, and for legendary armor, it's going to be 1 fewer module per rank, so slightly cheaper for armor. What this means is, with that daily limit, you can only actually craft 1.5 3-star legendaries per day, or 2 legendary armors per day that are 3 stars. And considering the vast majority of people want a good 3-star, that's the example I'm using. You could alternatively craft 2 2-stars per day. So although a lot of people are pretty hyped for this system, you don't actually get to use it all that much. If you play every single day of the week, you can craft a 3-star legendary 10 times. And that of course is assuming you're staying active and up to date with your script limit and all the other things you'll need. So what I would really describe this system as is, rather than being a replacement for the traditional legendary grind, it's kind of this almost slot machine pull you have every day if you want it. So like, let's say I know I want to get a full set of legendary XO1 power armor. Every day I'll have one shot at getting a cool 3-star, and a lot of days I probably won't get anything good, but you could just keep attempting once per day. But it's probably not going to replace the traditional legendary grind for a lot of people, because you really only get to do it 1 or 2 times per day depending on the day. This is definitely one of those systems that would probably be a lot more fun, just a lot more fun to get engaged into if the limit was a lot higher. You'll probably have a ton of weapons that you can convert into script, but you'll just consistently be hitting that 300 script limit, which is unfortunate. It's definitely a situation where it feels like Fallout 76 is suffering from like MMO-itis, or Bethesda wants people logging in every day, and it's another hard limit they're putting in place to hopefully ensure that. So now technically this isn't strictly true in the sense that there are some other daily things that give you script. So every single day you can just grind out daily apps non-stop, and you have a chance at earning 5 to 50 script. And to be clear, you could earn 0. There's just a chance you do get script, and then you may get 5 script to 50 script. But I'm gonna go out on a whim and guess the vast majority of you aren't going to be grinding daily apps every single day, multiple times per day, just to get like 1, maybe 2 extra chances at a legendary weapon. With this, there's also technically a downgrade slash reroll mechanic, but it's kind of pointless or never the best thing to do unless you're lazy. So there's no way to actually preserve attributes. Bethesda describes how you can reroll legendary items, but basically what this means is if you have a already legendary item, you can craft that into a legendary, but it'll just replace all the legendary effects on it and just give it totally new ones. So you're just taking the existing legendary and kind of re-rolling everything it has. Alternatively, you could just craft a new non-legendary, and it costs the exact same amount to create that into a 3-star legendary. And the same thing goes for downgrading. You could just take a 3-star and turn it into a 2-star at the same cost at taking a non-legendary and turning that into a 2-star. So most of the time I will probably be re-rolling just because I'm lazy and don't feel like crafting a new weapon, not because it actually makes sense. There's no real benefit, again, to downgrading or re-rolling, and I kind of wish there was. It'd be cool if that made it slightly cheaper if the weapon was already legendary, like if it required 1 less module. So overall, legendary crafting definitely improves your odds at getting a specific type of legendary. Like if you have a fixer and you know you want to eventually get a god roll on that fixer, this might give you a better chance at getting that overall. But considering how many different combinations of 3-star legendaries there are, it still literally could take you months, or I think technically years, of doing this before you get the exact combination you want. So overall, again, it's an improvement. Just temper your expectations with this one. It's not a replacement for the existing legendary system, and if you're a casual player not stressing about over damaging too much, it's probably just a fun addition that you could grind towards occasionally. But there's definitely a lot of hardcore players that were fairly disappointed and hoping for something else with this, or at least the ability to use it more often. But then we get into legendary power armor, which may lead some of you to completely change your build, because this stuff is powerful. So legendary power armor is actually really simple. Now via legendary crafting or enemies in the world, or even the legendary purveyor, you can craft or find legendary pieces of power armor. The big difference is that on power armor, there's a few select legendary attributes that cannot spawn on power armor. Here's a full list. I'm not going to go through all of them. The biggest and most notable is unyielding, which is an extremely popular effect that basically increases many of your special stats the lower your health is. Lots of people use this. This is what I use on my typical armor. This used to be applicable on legendary power armor, but they actually removed it during the PTS to many players' frustration or even anger. But otherwise, as it exists right now, legendary power armor is basically always going to be better than legendary armor unless you're going a unyielding build or a high intelligence build, and those sometimes are kind of one and the same. And of course, the actual frustration of moving around in power armor, but from a stat perspective, it'll basically always be better. This because power armor in general has higher base stats, higher resistances. Power armor has flat damage reduction. So if you're wearing power armor, you get 42% reduced incoming damage, which is huge. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of the system. It is almost a lazy implementation in a way. People thought there'd be some trade-offs to legendary power armor, but no, it's just better the vast majority of the time. Unless again, you are going unyielding, but with the whole special respec system, I would honestly recommend trying out a legendary power armor build. There's a lot of really cool and fun tanky combinations, and although it's going to take some time to get a proper set, it's only been like 24 hours since the update came out for me. Over time, you'll probably be seeing a lot more of this in my videos because I enjoy being tanky. I don't want to die in Fallout 76 anymore. And although more testing definitely needs to be done around this, with the right set of legendary power armor, you could become nearly unkillable in Fallout 76. Although one notable thing with this that's kind of an interesting byproduct, legendary power armor actually scripts for a bit more, as well as it's just heavy. So as you start looting legendary power armor off enemies, you'll probably have to drop some pieces because you will quickly fill up your stash space and not be able to script it all. But then we transition into the legendary rebalance, as well as some of the new legendary attributes just added to the game. So with this update, Bethesda announced that they'd be adding new legendary effects for both weapons, armors, and now power armors, but also rebalancing some of the existing ones. And although I was super excited about this, I feel like it has fallen short. I'm not going to go into every specific effect. That in and of itself was probably a 30 to 40 minute video, plus more time is needed for testing. Obviously, it's kind of difficult to find all of these legendary effects or even find good builds with all these legendary effects. But first, looking at some of the rebalance, I was actually pretty disappointed with this one. There's a lot of things that could use rebalancing. The legendary system in Fallout 76 is really a cornerstone of this game, especially the late game, and it really hasn't gotten much balance changes since release. So I was hoping this would be a pass that would make a lot of the garbage effects much more relevant, and although somewhat it does, it also kind of doesn't. Legacies are still really overpowered. They kind of remain the kings in the system. A lot of the meta builds are kind of untouched. They still are the most powerful and the most meta builds. Most of the legendary effects that gave you bonus damage versus a specific type of creature will now give you plus 50% bonus damage. Previously it was lower. So Ghoul Slayers will give you plus 50% bonus damage against ghouls, which is handy, but it's so niche that I think a lot of times people aren't going to run these as their main weapon. It's not ever going to be a meta build, as a lot of people are just going to run things like Junkies or Blooded, as you can get that damage against every enemy in the game. Nocturnal and Berserkers each got their debuffs removed, as well as their buff timing reworked a bit. Nocturnal definitely isn't relevant now, but it is way better than it was previously, or at least I think it's way better than it was previously, and it's fun from time to time at nighttime to whip out some Nocturnal weapon. Suppressors was buffed slightly, so now it gives plus 25% damage reduction on enemies for 5 seconds. Enhanced VATS and Hitman's actually got two of the nicest buffs overall, mainly because they're not primary effects. Hitman's now gives you plus 25% damning when aiming down sights, which is pretty handy as a secondary effect on a lot of weapons, as well as Enhanced VATS now gives you plus 50% hit chance in VATS, which is also quite powerful. So overall, these didn't lead to a huge meta change. I was really hoping Bethesda would kind of dive in and rework a lot of the garbage tier things, or just try and buff things up, even over buff things, to create some new competition in the meta, but unfortunately these reworked effects don't do that. To me, the new effects are definitely more impactful and actually quite a bit more exciting. Some are potentially game changers and will lead you to change your build up. Aristocrats is potentially a very powerful one. It gives you plus 50% damage if you have 29,000 caps. And it's a scaling, so the more caps you have, the more damage for a max at 50% at 29,000. This is really good because it is a no compromise damage boost. Now that the cap limit is up to 40,000 caps, and if you just have 35,000 caps at all times, you will always get plus 50%. No having to deal with lower health, no having to deal with addictions or other debuffs to your character. It is a flat damage boost. All you need is money. Just don't be poor, bro. Lots of the new 2-star effects are pretty interesting and could add nice bonuses or kind of go well with a main primary effect, but to me, one of the most exciting ones is definitely Overeaters. On armor, what Overeaters is going to do is give you plus 6% damage reduction when your hunger and thirst meters are full. This means you can get up to 30% damage reduction, which is no joke. On a set of power armor, you could be real godly with this. And it's definitely a build I want to work towards and try out. It also pairs super well with one of the new 2-star effects with Gluttons. Gluttons will make it so your hunger and thirst grow slower, as well as if you do have the survival shortcut legendary perk, you can actually get a syringe that will give you full hunger and thirst every so often. So you could basically never worry about eating or drinking again and get 30% damage reduction as a result. So overall, I definitely like more of the new legendary effects, but some could still definitely use some reworking. Like Juggernauts is kind of the opposite of Bloodied. The higher your health, the higher your damage output, but it only gives you up to plus 25% damage, which in some ways means it's almost dead on arrival. Like you get plus 25% damage or just be rich, which many players can easily get 30,000 caps and you will deal plus 50% damage. So overall, there are pros and cons. Some of these are great and I really like that they're at least changing things up a little bit. At the same time, it is a bit frustrating that even some of the reworked or even some of the new effects do kind of feel dead on arrival, or something like, okay, I'm basically never going to want to take that because there is a better no compromise alternative right now. One of the really cool additions with this update that's kind of minor but just handy or helpful for players is Minerva. Basically, this is going to be a new rotating vendor that can pop up at Crater, Foundation, or Fort Atlas. It will show up selling different things things certain days of the week, as well as she'll actually have different things for sale on different weeks. And basically what she has for sale are some of the familiar gold bullion items discounted, or even some of the daily ops items that you could only otherwise get during daily ops. So it's really cool, but for one reason or another, she's not actually spawning on the live server. The gameplay you're seeing is from the public test server. So perhaps we have to wait till the reset, so she might not spawn until this coming Monday, but if you're looking for her, it doesn't actually seem like she's active just yet for one reason or another, but definitely a cool addition again. The Atomic Shop got some updates. Two of the big additions being you can now purchase additional camp slots as well as special slots. Each of these added with an update earlier this year, but you couldn't get extra ones until now. Extra camp slots are going to run you a kind of outrageous $10 per slot, which is pretty insane. Technically this is 1,000 atoms, so there's other ways to get that, but still 1,000 atoms slash $10, that's a lot of money. Special slots are at least somewhat more reasonable at $5 per extra slot, and I actually feel like for many players add more gameplay, and you get several of these. I actually managed to buy up to 7 extra special slots before I gave up because I was spending so much money on them. Even further, there's a totally new cave shelter that was added on the Atomic Shop, and it's actually a really cool shelter. It's a distinctive design from the vault theme they've been going for thus far. You basically enter through this little mine shaft, and even the door to get in is pretty awesome. So then you have a more condensed area, and it opens up into a giant cave with another connecting small mine shaft as well as a small little pool of water in there. I'm really excited to see where people take this one or how they fill it in and design it. I actually think it's potentially one of the coolest shelter designs added thus far. Season 5 was also kicked off with this update. A couple of the interesting rewards you can get from this: some power armor displays. So if you want to display your power armor in your camp, you can do that now, which is pretty cool. There's a bunch of futuristic styled content, both weapons, armors, and backpack, and even it ends with a dolphin power armor, if that's what you're into. But also this has the unlimited rank mechanic, so once you finish the season, you can continue to earn new and additional rewards, this mostly being miscellaneous things in the game and some consumable items. A couple of surprise changes: you could finally sell floater grenades. I don't think this was in the patch notes, or at least I didn't see it, and it is actually kind of a huge addition because you got so many of these. Even further, the Nuka-Cola Collectron was fixed, so it'll now collect all kinds of different Nuka-Cola, but also is being sold by Samuel for gold bullion if you missed out on it last season. Due to some of the changes with the new story content, West Tech's interior is now an instance, so you could consistently go back there and continue grinding it, which makes it actually a kind of OP grind route if you want that. Unfortunately, there's at least a couple of new bugs added with this one. It seems like the heavy weapon audio bug may be back, but also there's some kind of weird issue where right after you fast travel or respawn, you're actually stuck in place longer, so your controls slash screen will be stuck for a longer time than they were previously, which is kind of an odd one. Also, a ton of people's challenges were auto completed on day 1, which obviously isn't the most pleasant kickoff to the new season, but Bethesda has responded, mentioning there'll be more challenges next week. But fortunately, in addition, there were also some bug fixes added with this one. There's an issue where you might lose a fusion core when entering or exiting power armor that was addressed. 2 players can now sit in the hot tub if you want to go that route. The dodgy perk will now correctly use AP on each consecutive hit, which probably means a ton of people will stop using it. Meat cleavers will now scrap the correct amount of materials. When you claim an item on the scoreboard, it's now added to the new tab in the Pip-Boy. Kind of a small thing, but actually a pretty nice quality of life change. And really, that's actually a good summary of this update overall. It's definitely one of the meatier ones, and I feel like a good balance of content, especially with the past few updates. We get some new quality of life features, some new features in general, some new daily op stuff, and now some new story content, as well as a ton of legendary changes. All of this coming together to mean that if you haven't played Fallout 76 in a while, or the last time you played was Wastelanders, this is definitely the best time to come back. And overall, I think this is a really solid update. It definitely fell short for me in a couple of ways. The story wasn't my favorite. I was definitely hoping for something a bit lengthier, but the content itself was still pretty solid in the story, as well as I wish the legendary overhaul and rework went a bit farther. But I think in general, it's still more good quality content, even though we had to make a few concessions on a couple of fronts. Plus, at the end of the day, if you already own the game, this is just a bunch more totally free content for you to enjoy and experience. And in particular with this update, a lot of this content you can enjoy with no additional cost. You could play all of this for free, and if you want to buy a couple of things off the Atomic Shop, you can, but you definitely don't need to. It's another really solid update for Fallout 76. Definitely doesn't have as many problems as some past updates, and it'll be interesting to see how Bethesda continues from this. Those private server changes are supposedly coming, and you might be finding out more shortly. With that said, hopefully you guys found this one informative. As always, again, I thank you for watching, and And with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.
To attain true enlightenment and exceed your physical bounds.